Today's stuff we're going to be learning is Avodah Zarah Daf Lamed. Today's stuff is sponsored anonymously in honor of Elisa and Maris Hartstein, the founders of the amazing Amutah NGO, Operation Ethiopia. Good luck on the upcoming medical mission this week. Your dedication and drive to bring basic and state-of-the-art eye care to those who are in dire need are inspirational. We are going to get started with the... Okay, let's before we start our daf, let's just talk a little bit about where we're going today. It's going to be a little bit zigzaggy. We're going to go back and forth from two different topics, which is, number one, are we worried that the idol worshiper offered this wine up as a libation? And that was where we started yesterday, about Yayin. And then we're going to get into if something was left uncovered, is it possible that a snake's venom got into it, that a snake came along, put its venom in, and they were very concerned for this in their time, and it was very dangerous. It was life-threatening. So this isn't exactly a halachic thing, although it becomes a halacha, okay, because of the danger of the venom of the snakes. Okay, you're going to see why we're going to get into this, because we're going to have a discussion about different types of wine, both relating to, is there a concern for Yayin, were they offering up this libation, and therefore forbidden, or was it a concern, and is it a concern if it's left uncovered? Okay, those are our two issues, and we're going to kind of go back and forth between them. We started the end of yesterday's daf with this issue of Yayin mevushal. I want to talk about Yayin mevushal a little bit. As we get to the end of the daf, we're finishing up, and now we have a little time until we get to the end of the daf and have to rush. But Yayin mevushal is basically wine that somebody cooked. There's a whole machloket. How much does it need to be cooked to be called Yayin mevushal? But a more interesting machloket than that is why Yayin mevushal is permitted. Okay, the issue is, what does it mean is permitted? Well, we finished off yesterday with, if it's my wine that's mevushal, a Jew's wine, that then it was cooked, and then the idol worshiper comes in contact with it, there's no concern they're going to offer it up to their gods. If, of course, it was in their possession in the first place, and then they cooked it, that doesn't resolve any issue, because it was originally regular wine, and it could be they at that point offered it up to their gods, and therefore we would be forbidden to benefit from it. So that is not what we're talking about. We're talking about our Yayin mevushal that ends up in then the Gentile coming in contact with it. So what's the issue with Yayin mevushal? The Rambam says, right, so we would assume the issue is it's not as good wine, which everybody knows Yayin mevushal is not considered as high quality wine. Because it's not as good, they won't offer it up as a libation to their gods, and since they won't offer it up, there's no concern. Again, you have to remember, we're not talking about wine that was definitely offered up, although that for sure would be forbidden. We're talking about wine that we don't know if it was, and since the Gentile came in contact with it, it's possible that when they did, they, said something to say, oh, we're offering this up to our gods, or had in mind, and therefore that's the concern. So if they definitely did, that's another story. Okay, we're going to talk about that also in tomorrow's daf when we get to Stam Yenam and all that. But the question right now is, we have this Yayin mevushal. So the assumption is, and that's the Ramban and the Rashbam and the Rosh, the Rashba and the Rosh, they all say that the issue is, it's not as good wine, they don't offer it up to their gods. Okay, that seems pretty straightforward. The Rambam has a different explanation. The Rambam says, what do we forbid as tikrovet? And we sussagio like this. We forbid things that, well, actually, it's going to come up later, I believe. Always a problem when I get ahead. But what's considered worshipped, or what's considered a tikrovet, something we offer up to their gods? Well, it's something that we do on our altar, in our temple. And therefore, we're going to say that what is forbidden for Yayin, wine that I would use on the temple, in our temple, that's going to be the wine that's going to be forbidden because of Yayin, which is fascinating, because it has nothing to do with what they did and what was typical, and is it possible they offered it, didn't offer it. The assumption is that we're not going to forbid things that we wouldn't have done in our temple. Okay, almost like it doesn't have significance because we wouldn't have done it in our temple, so therefore it's not really considered a tikrovet, which is very interesting, because you would think, like the other commentaries, all jump on the Rambam and say, no way, no how. It's all dependent on what these idol worshippers are doing. Are they offering this wine? Are they not? But the Rambam views it all in connection with what's forbidden on our altar, what we could bring on our altar, that's going to be what's forbidden on their side. And we don't bring Yayin mevushal on the altar for nisachim, for libations, so theirs are not going to be forbidden. Now we're going to move aside. There's no practical ramifications. It's just an interesting or at least I can't think of any. Maybe there are, but it's very interesting machloket. Starting now with the second line of our daf. Tanu Rabbanan. Yayin mevushal v'aluntit shel avdei kochavim asurim. So yayin mevushal and an aluntit. If we don't know what aluntit is yet, it's a drink or a combination of things we're going to talk about with some wine in it. If it belongs to an idol worshiper, it's forbidden. This is what we said before, what I said. If it's yayin mevushal that they themselves cooked, since originally it was wine, they could have offered it their libation at that point. So even though now it's cooked, it doesn't help. And aluntit kibriyata muteret. So aluntit, if it's again, if the aluntit is already created, let's say by a Jew, and then it gets into the hands of the idol worshiper, we're not worried because it's a mixture of things. Nobody offers that up as a libation to their gods just because it happens to have some wine in it. But if they make it from scratch and they had the wine in their possession before, then it's a problem. Now we want to know what aluntit is. Ezawi aluntit, keditnan gabe Shabbat. It actually comes up in a sugya Masechet Shabbat. Usin anumlim ve'enosin aluntit. You can make this mixture of anumlim because it's really, call it like a health drink. Okay, these are both things, refuah. You can't make medicinal concoctions on Shabbat because you might come to grind herbs and stuff, which is often what went into medicines. But even if you're not grinding, you're not allowed to. But if it's something that you would drink anyway when you're healthy, that people drink normally and also for medicinal purposes, but also they drink it for health purposes, then you can make it. So that's the anumlin. You can make it on Shabbat, but not aluntit. Be'ezui anumlin, be'ezui aluntit. Anumlin, yayin b'dvash u'pilpilim, wine, honey, and peppers. And aluntit is yayin yashan, old wine, mayim slulim, clear water, v'afar simon, and balsam oil. Or balsam, I assume they mean balsam, I don't know, maybe the fruits, maybe the oil. Either which way, the point is, the avde lebe masuta. They use this, by the way, when people get out of the bathhouse. Okay, there's people like jump into cold baths. People also drink certain drinks to cool them down. So this is a drink they would only use for coming out of the bathhouse. And that's why it has somewhat, it's like medicinal. It's not exactly, but it's somewhat medicinal. And nobody would drink it otherwise. So basically, it's not considered, right? It's considered more in the category of refuah. Whereas the anumlin, people drink otherwise as a regular drink and also for medicinal purposes. But therefore, it's permitted on Shabbat to make. Okay. But that was just a side to get to what this aluntit is, since it has wine in it. That's why it came up. Rabbi Rav Yosef to Amrei Travayu. Now remember this because we're going to change this by the end of the sugya, but right now they're going to say the following. Yayin mazug, diluted water, ein bo mishum giloi. Okay, since we're talking about wine, diluted wine. Diluted wine, that's the way they would make wine. They would dilute their wine. It came as a concentrate, and then they would add water to it. So if the wine is diluted, ein bo mishum giloi. Now we're jumping off to this topic of giloi, of leaving it uncovered. There's an assumption snakes won't drink diluted wine. They will drink undiluted wine, okay? And I looked this up, and it seems like there was an ancient belief that snakes, they associated snakes with wine, okay? Perhaps it goes back to, Adam Rishon and the snake then. Not sure, but there was this perception of snakes drinking wine. According to what I read, it's not exactly true. I can't say I'm an expert on this. I really just looked up a little bit. I'm definitely not an expert, but apparently this is going to be the discussion today. Do snakes drink wine? What wine do they drink? Are they willing to risk their lives for it? Are they not? Is it a difference of meaning if there's humans around or there aren't humans around or humans are sleeping? What happens then? Fascinating discussion about their perceptions of snakes, including they're going to bring stories of snakes as if, they saw once this happened, must be all snakes are like this, or at least we have to be concerned for it. Remember, they were worried about life and death, that this could kill you. So, have a huge, interesting discussion about snakes and wine. So, the assumption right now of Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef is, Yayin mazug, they don't drink diluted wine. Yayin mevushal, now we're back to our topic, cooked wine, ein bo mishum nisuch. There's no worry of nisuch because, we already talked about that, either the Rambam or the other approach, but there's no nisuch issue. Meaning you can drink wine if a Gentile came in contact with it, if it was already mevushal. But what they didn't mention, they didn't talk about yayin mazug for nisuch, but that's wine. Okay, obviously it's a problem of yayin nesach. But what about yayin mevushal and giloi? Yesh bo mishum giloi, ein bo mishum giloi. Will snakes drink this cooked wine? Okay, now remember, it's subpar, this wine. So again, if there's this assumption, and we're going to see back and forth here, is this assumption snakes only drink really good wine, or they drink only bad wine, or, right? It's also an interesting discussion. So let's see. Tashma. He'id Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi al Yayin mevushal she'ein bo mishum gilui. So Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi testified about, usually when they testify, it's, I have a tradition, that cooked wine, you don't have to worry. If you leave it uncovered, the snake's not going to come. Rabbi Yana bar Yishmael chalash. Now we're going to hear a story. Rabbi Yana, the son of Yishmael, was sick. So they come in, the rabbis, they usually want to visit the sick, but also they want to get some halachic answers out of them, maybe also concerned they're going to die. So they sat and they asked, Yayin mevushal, yesh bo mishum giloi, or ein bo mishum giloi? Okay, they asked exactly this question. Amar luhu Rabbi Yishmael ben Zerud. Okay, here it's interesting. They came, it sounded like they were coming to ask Rabbi Yana bar Yishmael, but Rabbi Yishmael ben Zerud answers, this is what Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Rish Lakish, said in the name of a great man. Umanu, who is this great man? They claim it's Rabbi Chia. We're going to see him later also saying the same thing. Yayin mevushal ein bo mishum giloi. So they quote him, Rabbi Shmuel quotes him saying, no problem. Amrule nismoch. They said, can we rely on this? You could see they were very concerned, right? You think, Paskin, you can do it, don't worry. But now they're all, really? Can we rely on that? Machvele Rabbi Yana bar Yishmael. Now remember, he was the one who was sick. He what do you say? Gestures to them. Alai va'al tzavari. Okay, I'll take responsibility for it. Okay, on me. You can drink it, no problem. Another story. Shmuel va'avlet. Okay, now I told you we're going to zigzag a little. Now we're moving to Yayin nesech with Yayin mevushal, relating to Yayin nesech and not giloi. So Shmuel va'avlet. Avlet was a chacham who was not Jewish, and he was a friend of Shmuel's, and they would sit together a lot, and there's stories about them. They had a good relationship, and Avlet seemed to know halacha. Certainly, you see so from this story, although maybe not as well as Shmuel did. So Shmuel and Avlet have yatve. They're sitting there. So they bring yayin mevushal. Now Avlet sees wine, and he knows the law that he can't come in contact with the wine, otherwise Shmuel won't be able to drink it. So he moves his hands away to make sure not to touch the wine. Amar le Shmuel, haramru yayin mevushal, ein mevushal yayin nesach. He says, oh, don't worry, this is mevushal. There's no problem. Now we're moving back to giloi. Okay, I told you we're going to go back and forth. We have a lot of stories here. Now you have to remember, wine was their main staple drink, so it makes sense they have a lot of stories about wine. And it clearly was an issue for them. So Amteja Rabbi Chia igale luahu chamra mevashla. So she had Yayin mevushal, that this the maidservant of Rabbi Chia. Remember, Rabbi Chia, he's the one who said Yayin mevushal is not a problem if it's left open. Okay, so now we have a story with his maidservant. Igale lehu chamra mevashla. She had Yayin mevushal that was left uncovered. Ati l'kameid Rabbi Chia. She brings it before Rabbi Chia. What am I supposed to do? And we already know what he's going to say. Amar la. He says, listen, this is what they said. By the way, this shows that he didn't say it himself. He was passing on a tradition. Before they passed on the tradition that it came from him. Here we see that he's saying, I learned it from somebody else. Shamei de Rav Ad bar Ava. We're going to have a bunch of stories with the shamashim, because they're the ones handling the wine, right? These are the workers in their house. So like the stewards. So the steward of Rav Ad bar Ava, he left open this diluted wine. And now the question is, diluted wine, snake. What did we see before? Rabbi and Rav Yosef said, diluted wine, no problem of the snake. So let's see if that's what we see in the story. Amar le, so they said to him, right, he came asking a shaila. They said to him, right, I guess Rav Ad, he must have come to Rav Ad bar Ava. He said to him, they say, it's not a problem. Amar Rav Papa, lo maran elam de mazig tuva. Rav Papa says it depends how diluted it is. If it's really diluted, the snake won't drink it. Aval mazik v'lo mazik shate. But if it's in between, a little diluted, not so much diluted, then they'll drink it. They don't say how much this is. I didn't look up the commentaries, but I assume usually mazik is usually 2 parts to a third part, like 2 to 1, or like 1 to 2, or 1 to 3. Okay, like usually it's a ravit. It's like 3 parts wine, 3 parts water, 1 part wine. So maybe less than that. I'm not sure. But somehow they're going to say that mazik v'lo mazik, he will drink. Okay, if it's in between, a little diluted but not too diluted, the snake will drink it. To which the Gemara wants to know, is that really true? And they're going to bring a story to show it's not. Mazik v'lo mazik mishate. You think a snake is going to drink partially diluted wine? We have a story, and again, assuming, the story proves the principle that it won't drink. Right? They're assuming all snakes behave the same way. So Rabbi Rav Huna was on a boat. He had wine with him on the boat. He saw a snake that was slithering up to try to come near the wine. He said to his steward, blind the eyes of the snake, which basically doesn't mean blind the eyes, it means get this snake away from here. And I don't want him to see my wine, I don't want him to come and ruin my wine. Shkil kalemaya shadebe. So the steward takes water, puts a little bit of water in the wine. What do you see? Mazik v'lo mazik. It's partially diluted because it wasn't diluted previously, it sounds like. And then he pours a little water in it. Bisar la'achore, and the snake immediately leaves. So what do you see? Snakes don't drink mazik v'lo mazik, partially diluted wine. To which they answered, no, that's not a difficulty, because achaye masar nafshe, a maziga lo masar nafshe. This story has an added element. There's humans here. And that scares the snakes also. So now, the question is, on what a snake is willing to risk his life. A snake will risk his life to get to the concentrated wine. That they're willing to risk their life. But the partially diluted, they're already not really willing to risk their lives for. And therefore, in this story, the snake didn't come close because of the water, because there were humans there. In other words, the fear of humans is, they'll see the snake going to the wine, and the humans might try to kill him. So, but if there's nobody there, like let's say you leave it out overnight and you leave it in your kitchen and you're in your bed, and there's no concern. The snake will come as long as the wine is only partially diluted, the snake may come. So if you leave out wine like that, it would be a problem. Even though in this story it wasn't a problem, that's because there were people there. Come back to this later about people and what if the people are sleeping, okay? And it reminds me of thieves, right? Will they come into somebody's house? Will they go into their room when they're sleeping? Right? I know someone who was robbed. They went into a room, took out something right from next to her bed and left. Will they do that when they're sleeping or not? So we're going to have the same question with snakes, right? I had a case where we were robbed and they went in, my daughter happened to not be home that night, and they went into her room, opened her drawer, pulled out her computer and stole it. Whereas I thought, if she was home and sleeping, they probably wouldn't have come into the room, right? But you never know. So again, these are just assumptions we make, and then we'll talk about what are the ramifications of these assumptions, because in this case, it's life and death. So we'll get back to that. So now they ask, wait a minute, amaziga lo masar nafshe? Our assumption right now is that if it's diluted, they're not going to risk their lives, because that's what we saw in the story. But wait, Harabi Yanai, here's another story. Hava Be'ach Borei. He was in this place called Be'ach Borei. V'amrela was Bar Hadaya and not Rabbi Yanai that was there. Hava Be'ach Borei. I don't remember which place, but there was debate about who it was. Hava Yata V'kashatu Chamra Mezika. They were drinking diluted wine. Pashlu Chamra Bekuba. So they had a little wine left. By the way, some people say it wasn't diluted at all, because we want to really get to a case. There's different girsas here. Actually makes sense if it wasn't diluted at all. You'll see the story in a minute, because we want to get to mazik v'lo mazik, not really diluted. So let's just go with it wasn't mazug at all. It was undiluted wine. They had some left. What did they do with it? They took the chamra bekuba, it was in its jug, and sarunu beprunka, and they covered it with a piece of material. Okay, they didn't have a jug cover, a cork or something. So they just put a cloth on top of it. Now they watched, and what did they see? A snake came along, and the snake wanted the wine. But the snake couldn't get into the wine because there was a cloth there. So the snake was very smart. Okay, this sugya shows how smart the snakes were. Deshakil Maya, he took water, the snake, uberamul bekuba, and he started sprinkling water. Now a cloth, the water can get through. So he kept putting water on top of this jug, on the cloth. It was probably close to full anyway. And he starts putting water into the cloth, on top of the cloth, until the whole thing filled up. And what happened when it filled up? Wine started coming out, basically. The wine was seeping out. And what did the usalik chamra ilave pranka, right? There was some wine at the top of the cloth. Vishate. And the snake went over to the cloth and sucked, at the wine and got some wine. It's a very smart snake. But what do you see here? That in the end, the snake was willing to drink, right? Went through this whole thing to drink diluted wine. How do we know it was diluted? Assuming it wasn't diluted to begin with, but the snake diluted it on its own. And there were humans around. So what do you see? The snake does risk their lives to drink diluted wine. To which the Gemara comes up with this interesting distinction. Amre demazik ihu shate, demazik achrine lo shate. Well, they'll drink wine that they themselves diluted, just not wine that someone else diluted. They don't want someone else's diluted wine, but if they dilute it themselves, I think also the idea is that the snake really wanted the wine that was in it. So the snake diluted it just to get the wine, but it wasn't that the snake really wanted the diluted wine. It was the only way to get it. So anyway, this seems to say that they would risk their lives, but we resolved it because that's only when they dilute it themselves. So we're still left with, if it's partially diluted, they'll do it if it's not a risk for life, but they won't do it if it's a risk to their lives. Whereas if it's diluted, they'll even risk their lives for it, and therefore, again, we have to see the situation. Were there humans around, were there no humans around, all that. Now comes the big line. Amar of Ashi, V'Tamer of Masharshia. So now we're basically assuming there are certain situations where we're not worried that the snake put its venom in because snakes don't behave that way typically. To which Rav Ashi says, or maybe Rav Masharshia said, Peruka l'sakanta? Wait a minute. We're going to make these assumptions when it in fact could endanger our lives? Like, why don't we just, if we're not sure exactly how the snakes are going to behave, and this snake might behave that way, and that snake might behave another way, we're going to allow people to drink these things when it could actually kill them? It doesn't make any sense. So Amar Rava, based on that question, Rava comes and says, Hilchata, the halacha is, Yayin mazug yesh bo mishum giloi. Even if it's diluted, completely diluted, you have to worry about giloi. You should not drink that wine. And yesh bo mishum yenesech, and that's just an obvious halacha, which is, of course, diluted wine. That's what people would offer up as libations. And yayin mevushal ein bo mishum giloi ve'ein bo mishum yenesech. But yayin mevushal, you don't have to worry about either. So we started this sugya by saying that Rabbi and Rabbi Yosef said the yayin mazug, there's no problem of giloi, and in the end we changed that because of this concern that it's not worth taking a risk of your life for it. Shama, and yet the yayin mevushal just stays the same. Okay, whatever we said about in the beginning, we say at the end, which is neither is an issue. The snakes don't drink it, and the idol worshippers don't offer it up as libations. Shama d'Rav Chilkiya bar Tuva, but we're not done with this topic yet, even though it kind of sounded like they were at the end. Shama d'Rav Chilkiya bar Tuva. So again, we have the shamash, the steward, because they're the ones who handle the wine. Igal Yahu Kista Demaya. It was left open a jug of water. Sorry, now we're in water, uncovered water. Because now, forget about whether it's water, wine, it doesn't matter. Okay, let's assume wine is the same problem. But it happened to be water. But the issue here is he was sleeping. Okay? Now, V'havanayim Gaba, he was sleeping right next to it. So now we get to the issue I mentioned before, which wasn't yet in the Gemara, but now it comes up. Ata l'gabei Rav Chilkiya bar Tuva. So we brought it to Rav Chilkiya bar Tuva. Amarlei. Oh, snakes are scared of people sleeping. They're worried the person's going to wake up and attack them, so you don't have to worry. You can drink that water. But this, by the way, they limit this, qualify it, but yamama, it's only during the day. Apparently the snakes know the difference between the way people sleep during the day and the way people sleep at night. If someone's sleeping during the day, they're in a light sleep, so the snake's worried the person will get up. But at night, the snake's not worried at all. Like the robber, right? If a robber came into your house during the day and you were napping, they probably wouldn't come and steal something right next to you. But at night, say, you're sleeping. Vilohi. But in fact, it's not true. Or it's not true halachically. Again, we go back to, you should always be scared that the snake came. Whether you were sleeping during the day, whether you were sleeping at night, could be the snake will come, not be scared of you, and therefore it's a problem. Rav lo shati mi be'al ramai. Amar lo zahira b'giloi. Now we have a question. If you go to someone's house and you want to drink water and they're not Jewish, now of course you don't have to worry about kashrus, right? If you want to drink their wine, you have to worry about yenesech. If you want to drink their water, though, you have to worry that they're not makpid on giloi, and maybe their water was left open overnight and you can't drink it. Right? You ever think about that? You can't drink water in someone else's house, right? Crazy. So he wouldn't drink water in the house of an Aramean because of that. He said they're not trusted. They don't care about gilui. Mibe armelata shate. But in the house of a widow, he would drink. Okay, what does a widow have to do with anything? Well, Amar Sircha de Gavra Nikita. In other words, the assumption is she might not know halacha so much because she's a woman. Women then didn't learn halacha. She might not know what to do, or she might just want to drink it anyway. But since her husband, who's no longer, but she has the fear of her husband still upon her, or the halachas of her, the tradition. Like, that's what she did in her house when her husband was there. She's going to keep doing that once he's the habits. Thank you, that's the word. The habits of her husband are upon her. Shmuel lo shate mayim mi beit armalata. Now, he's going to be the exact reverse of Rav. He wouldn't drink water in the house of a widow. Amar, le'le'im to the gavra, v'lo machas yamayim. This is why I was thinking of the fear. She doesn't have the fear of her husband anymore. In other words, why does she keep the habits of her husband when he's alive? She's a little bit intimidated by her husband. She wants to make sure she keeps his habits. But once he's dead, fear of him is no longer upon her. And she doesn't cover her water necessarily. Aval. It's interesting how untrusting they were. Aval mi be'aramayim shate. But in the house of an Aramean, you can actually drink. Why is that? Nihidi igaluye lo kapte, amenakruta mia kapte. Now, she might not be worried about leaving the Aramean might not be worried about this giloi, about the snake, but is worried about cleanliness, about dirt falling into their water, so they won't leave it uncovered because of dirt. This is bichlal interesting, right? Tina, you're asking what? The woman's not worried about her own safety, and the Gentile's not worried about safety? In other words, if it was really a safety issue, completely only a safety issue and not a halachic issue, then they would be concerned as well. So it seems a little hard to understand this sugya. I'm just going to mention that this raises a whole bunch of questions as to why people who aren't careful about halacha, so to speak, would not be concerned for their lives. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they felt like only people who know halacha know that this is where the dangers come from. It's a little bit unclear. Also, I got to imagine that if somebody drank water that was uncovered, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to die. So people maybe weren't taking this as seriously, and the rabbis thought this was really a concern. Wait till we get to later in the sugya where we're going to see people drank things and some people died, some people didn't. We're going to get back to that. So you can see, it seems obvious from the sugya that not everybody was so careful about this, and not everybody was so worried about this, even though there is a danger. It doesn't mean, there could be a 1% danger, and because of that the rabbi said don't do it, but it doesn't mean it was an immediate danger. That seems pretty clear from here. So right now we have a crisscross, right? The one that he permitted, he didn't drink, right? He wouldn't. The one, okay, back and forth. Now, we're going to get a different version, though. So that's the same. The Rav wouldn't eat in the Aramean's house, but would eat from the widow. But Shmuel, lo shatei ma'ay lo mibe'er amayim v'lo mibe'er balata. And Shmuel wouldn't drink in either one of their houses. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, Shalosh yeinotem ba'em behem mishum giloi. So there's 3 types of wine that you really don't have to worry about giloi. Okay, forget about mazug, lo mazug. Snakes won't drink this. Now the big question is why? And this goes back to, will a snake drink, right? The snakes won't drink yayin mevushal, so maybe that means the snakes will only drink good quality wine. Okay, if they're going to drink already, they're only going to drink the good quality. On the other hand, non-diluted wine was pretty, nobody drank that, so unclear. Or maybe they don't drink, right? Maybe they specifically drink bad wines. Okay, we're going to see. There's a bit of a disagreement here. Elohen chad mal matok. So chad is very sharp. That's tila charifa de mitzare zika. It's such sharp wine that it breaks the jug. Okay, I don't think it really breaks the jug, but it means really sharp, which means it's just bad tasting. So the snake's not going to drink that. Mar is yarnaka. Okay, whatever that is. It's some kind of bitter wine. And matok is chulia. That just means sweet. Matok is very sweet wine. So they don't drink those wines. So you don't have to worry about giloi. Rav Chama mani li'iluya. He learned these 3, but specifically that they were amazing wines, and the snakes don't drink amazing wines. So again, either it's that the snakes don't drink the poor quality wines, or the snakes don't drink the best wines. They like poor quality wine. So what is chad? Chamru pilpulin. It's wine with spices in it, right? Like pepper. So it's sharp. Mar aspintim, which has wormwood in it. Matok mebarg. It has some sweet in it, and it's a very good quality wine. Amar Rav Shimon ben Lakish, Karina ein bo mishum giloi. Rish Lakish says this Karina doesn't have giloi. You don't have to worry about the snake. My Karina, what is this? Amar Rav Yaval, Chamra Chalya da'atim Asya. It's this sweet wine that comes from Asia, and the snakes don't like it. But, very fascinating, Amar Rabba, ubim komo yesh bo mishum giloi. But if you're in Asia, where this is what they drink, the snakes there drink it also. Okay? And my time chamar medinahu. Okay, fascinating. He uses this term chamar medina, which is used like in the issue of kiddush. What can you make, right? You might have beer instead of wine. Well, if it's chamar medina, you can use it for kiddush. If it's not, right, if that's the wine of the place, it changes it. He uses this term here to say, well, that's the wine in Asia, so the snakes there drink it. Again, this all goes back to the concept that snakes drink wine, right? That there was this belief that they drink wine, and then obviously they're going to drink the wine that's endemic to the area they're in. Amarava. Now we're going to talk about what if the wine starts to go bad. And this reminds us of sugyas and baba metzia. If you're selling wine and the wine goes bad, right? If is it wine, vinegar, all that? So hai chamer da akrim. If the wine starts souring, we assume, because once it turns to vinegar, the snakes aren't drinking it. But the first 3 days it starts to go, we saw the same 3 days in Baba Metzia, you have to still worry about giloy, it's still like wine. And also, because as long as it's wine, all these issues are still relevant. Turning now to Amabed, after 3 days already, once it's considered vinegar, no issues at all. Again, they have this concern. Even after 3 days, in Nahardia, they said, it could be a snake will come and drink it. It happens once in a while. So again, best to avoid this dangerous situation. Tanu Rabbanan. Now what about, this was once the wine starts going bad. What about before the wine even turns to wine in the beginning, right? It's just grapes with, liquid coming from grapes. Grape juice. So Yayin toses, as it's fermenting, ein bo mishum giloy. You don't have to worry about it. Kamet sisato, how long is this? Shlosha yamim. Okay, this comes up also in lots of other sugiyot, particularly when can you use wine for kiddush? Okay, this all sorts of ramifications. So 3 days. Hashachalayim, if you have cress in a liquid, ein bo mishum giloy. You don't have to worry about it. The snakes don't eat stuff with cress in it. Ubnei gola nahagu b'hem isul. Well, the people in the gola. Some people say this is Rabbi Chia and his sons because they were in Israel, but they came from Babylonia, and they called them the Bnei Gola, the outsiders, basically, the immigrants. They forbade this. But this is only cress if it's in a liquid, it's not vinegar. If it's cress and vinegar, definitely they stay away from vinegar, those snakes. If it has vinegar, it bothers their throat, like as they're drinking it, it tickles, it itches, it's unpleasant for them. Kuta chabavli, a very famous food, okay, which the rabbis in Eretz Yisrael mock. It's like they call it a disgusting food, but the Babylonians obviously liked it. It was a kind of dip that was made of sour milk and it has some bread in it, moldy bread, and all sorts of weird things in it. But apparently it was some sort of delicacy in Babylonia, which the Israelis hated. So interestingly here, it's important to understand this because kuta chabavli ein bo mishum giloy. They say it's not an issue of giloy, but again, the Bnei Golan nahagu bo isur. The people who came from Babylonia treated it with isur. They said, what do you mean? Snakes in Babylonia eat the kuta chabavli. Again, it goes back to what we saw about the Asya, the Asia. So he says, even though we don't need we don't worry about the kuta chabavli if it has indentations, right? Like if you're in your house and you see someone stuck their fingers into the food, right? So if you see there's these indentations in your kuta chabavli, then you know, or you have to worry that maybe it was like the fangs of the snake that went into your food. Here's another way to avoid giloy, or a situation where we don't have to worry about it. Mei tif ein bo mishum giloy. If you have, Rashi explains that you have, let's say, a barrel of wine and it's dripping, and it drips onto something metal, and it makes this drip, 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 drip sound. Well, that's going to scare away the snakes. They're not going to like the noise, and they're not going to come anywhere near it. So if you had something that was dripping, it actually would mean that even if you left it uncovered, it would be fine. It has to be that it's continuous. If it's not continuous and it stops, then when it stops, the snake could come. Now we're going to move on to something else about giloy. Pi te'ena embo mishum giloy, the opening of the fig. Debate what exactly this is. Some people think we're talking about the part where it was attached to the tree, and now it's a little bit open when it comes off the tree. You don't have to worry that a snake went in because it's juicy. Maybe the snake sucked out some of the juice. So why don't you have to worry about it? Come on, according to the Shmuel go. Ki Tana de Tanya, like the following Tana, as it says in this Breita. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Ochel Adam Anavim Uteinim Balayla ve'eno choshesh mishum shenemar shomer p'ti'im Hashem. Okay, you can eat these grapes and figs that were, I think Balayla they mean that were left out at night. I'm assuming they mean but you don't have to worry that the snakes got into it, because Mishum Shenemar Shomer P'tim Hashem, God saves the foolish people. Now, this could have different meanings, but I think it's like what people say, Hashem Yishmol, like, you can't stop yourself. The way they translate it in the Koran, I believe it was, where I saw it, you can't stop yourself from doing mundane everyday activities and think, oh my God, what could happen? That like there's a certain amount we just assume God protects us. I mean, anything, as we say, is dangerous, right? Crossing the street is dangerous, right? Somebody wants to go do some crazy, rappelling off some, I don't know, and the parent says it's dangerous, so I could get killed crossing the street, right? Anything is dangerous, but we assume overall God protects the foolish and God protects, us in general. And if it's an everyday activity that maybe there's a concern, maybe you don't have to go ad kedei kach. Okay, you don't have to go that extreme. I'm Rav Safra, Mishum Rabbi Yeshua Daroma. Okay, Rabbi Yeshua, who was from the south. This is a Rabbi Yeshua who came from the south. Rav Safra says in his name, Shlosha minei eresheim. Now we get to another issue. And I talked about some people dying, some people not. We're going to see that in this sugya. There's 3 types of poison. Shel bachol, if it's a young snake. The venom is shokea. It's very potent, and it sinks to the bottom because it's heavy. Shel benoni, right, assuming we're talking about a barrel or a cup of water or whatever it is. Shel benoni, and in between, like average age, middle age. Mifapea. It kind of bubbles up. It goes like up, it kind of hangs out in the middle. Shel zaken tzaf. The one of an old snake just is very weak, and it floats to the top because it's so light. So first they want to question this. Remember, what? As the older the snake gets weaker. It says in a Braita the opposite. There's 3 creatures that as they get older, they get stronger. What are they? Eluhain, dag, nachash, v'chazir. A fish, a snake, and a pig. Okay, if anyone wants to, look into this and tell me if it's true, be interested to know. So anyway, the Gemara answers, no, this is not a problem. Strength, physical strength, they get stronger as they get older. Zihare kalish, but their venom gets weaker. Okay, they're not 2 different things. One is physical strength and one is the potency of the venom. Okay, well, what's the relevance halachically of the fact that it will sink to the bottom if it's a young snake? Ditanya, as it says in the following Braita, chavit shenitkala. If you have a barrel that was uncovered, even though 9 people drank and didn't die, you could see they're concerned that people are going to see, oh, well, this was uncovered and nobody died, so I could drink this, even though I know it was uncovered. No, the 10th person shouldn't drink, because why? Because it could be it's at the bottom, and the 9 people drank from what was at the top, and the venom happened to be from a snake that was very potent venom. It sunk to the bottom, and therefore, that's why they didn't die, but you might die if you drink it. And in fact, right, they love to do this, there was a case, right, classic, whether it happened or not, we don't know, but, right, this is basically saying, oh yeah, and by the way, this happened. 9 people drank, they didn't die, the 10th drank and died. I'm a Rabbi Yirmiyah, Zeu Shokem. When they hear this story, Rabbi Yirmiyah said, that is a venom that obviously sunk. V'chein avatiach. Interesting, they're talking about avatiach. Before we said we're not worried about certain fruits and the juiciness. Watermelon is, why is it called watermelon, right? It's full of water, very watery. So I guess they were concerned about the venom. So avatiach shenitkalta, that was left open. Again, if 9 people ate, the 10th shouldn't drink because maybe the venom sunk. And in fact, maaseh haya, again, miraculously, they happen to have a maaseh shaya. 9 ate it, they didn't die. The 10th ate it and died. Amar Rebbe, now the commentaries fix this or the side notes, Rabbi Yirmiyah, just like the previous story, v'zeu shokeh. Now it could be there was a story that went around, it wasn't clear which one it was about, and then, it got about both, avatiach and the barrel. Tanu Rabbanan, Mayim Shenitgalu. Okay, now we're going to learn. Until now, we've been talking about it's dangerous and you shouldn't drink it. Now we're going to learn there's all sorts of other things you shouldn't do with water that was left uncovered. Mayim Shenitgalu, Hareze lo yishbachem bereshit harabim. Don't throw them into the public domain. Rashi says the concern is you're going to step on them barefoot and it might go into your feet, and from there you could get like an infection from it, kind of thing. The venom is so potent that it's not just drinking it. They used to throw water on their floors because their floors were made of dirt and the dust would rise up, and they would throw water on the floor. That was how they cleaned their floors. So you shouldn't do that either, because again, people walk around barefoot and they might, it might go into their bodies. V'lo yigabel behen tatit. Don't knead the clay with it, because then it'll go into your hands, and that could also make you die. Don't let your animals or your friends' animals drink from it. Okay, now this is a good debate why you can't do that. So some people are concerned that you or your friend might shech the animal, eat it, and the animal has the poison in it, and you could die. Or is it a concern for the animals, and then your own animal, it's tsar ba'alei chayim, you can't kill, cause the death of animals, or it could be bal tashchit, more looking at animals as property, and you're just destroying something in the world, not as much because they're animals or alive. And then the be'emah chavero is a dinei mamonot issue. You're destroying someone else's property. Like, go back to Bava, the Bavas. Okay. Now, lo yirchatz ben panav yadav v'raglav, and it's dangerous to wash your hands, your face, and your feet. Right? That goes back to what we saw before about not stepping on them. Achirim omrim, others say, makom sheyesh sirta asura. If there's open crevices, that's dangerous. Like we always talk about infections, right? That's when you get the most infections, when you have open skin. That's how bacteria can get in. That's when it's forbidden, ein sirta mutal. But if it's smooth and not cracked, it's not a problem. So achirim hanutan kam, it sounds kind of the same. Well, no, ikabenayu gavayad gavaregal v'rumine da'ape. Places on your face, like your cheeks or your forehead, or your feet and your hands where you don't have cracks and crevices, it's fine, okay? But Tanakama would say no. So that's the machloka between Acherim and Tanakama. Now let's just go back to this line about the animals. Amar marlo yeshkebehem lo behem tov lo behem achaviro v'hatanya aval mashkeu lebehem atatzmo. It says you can give your animal to drink, your own animal, not your friends, but you can give your own. So how do we reconcile? Well, kitanya hi l'shunra. You say, oh, that's a cat. You can feed your cat, give him water to drink that was revealed, because the assumption is that the venom of a snake doesn't affect the cat. So they say, well, if it doesn't affect the cat, then you should be able to do it to your friend's cat as well. By the way, this shows that people own cats, which is interesting. So you should be able to give it to your friend's cat. So they say, no, you'll weaken your friend's cat, and that's why it's a problem. Okay, well then we're going to say, well, then you're not allowed to weaken your own cat, right? Tsar ba'alei chayim or bal tashchit, or however we look at it. Well, hadar bari. No, well, the cat will get better. So we don't mind if you cause damage to the cat, if ultimately the cat will get better. Okay, the chavri nami hadar bari. We keep trying to figure out why this is only for your own and not for your friends. If it's your friend's cat, well, also the cat will get better. Well, zimnin d'bai l'zabune umafsid le'minei. No, because the friend might want to sell the cat right now. So while the cat might get better in a week, today you've ruined the cat, and it might be that's the day they want to sell their cat, and you're causing them a financial loss. So if it's your own sake, well, there's no financial loss to causing yourself. We don't care. You could do anything to yourself to cause yourself financial loss. It's not a problem. Temporary financial loss. You'll just wait next week. You're the one who did it. But your friends, you might be causing them financial damage. Okay? But basically we're going to say a cat is the one exception to the rule. It's not really susceptible to venom, just temporarily. Amar Rabbi Asi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Yehuda ben Betera, last line for today. Shlosha yenot heim, we're only going to get started on this. There are going to be 3 types of different wines we're going to discuss. Yayin nesach is the first one, which we've learned already. Asur b'hana'ah, you can't benefit from it. U'metamei tumah chamura b'kizayit. And it has tumah like a dead body. Okay, this is because we say tikrov et avodah zarah, anything they offer to their gods is forbidden. So, is also tameh like a dead body. So the tumah chamura is in a case of yayin nesach where we know they offered up as a libation to their gods. Since it was offered as a tikrova to an idol, we are forbidden, and so we can't benefit, right? We can't drink it, we can't benefit, like sell it, and it has tumah chamura, that it will be metame kizayit, like a dead body. In an OL, Rashi even says, there's a bit of a debate about that. Rashi says OL, and anyway, magamasa, all the ways that a dead body imparts impurity. Okay, with that we'll finish for today. We'll continue what he says in the next daf. So, we really did today, just to summarize, it was a little hard to organize the daf entirely in organized fashion because it wasn't the most organized daf. But we talked about the topic of giloi, of having uncovered drinks, what drinks are snakes likely to drink, not likely to drink, what wine is potential for yayin nesach, that if a Gentile comes in contact, we have to be concerned. If an idol worshiper specifically, we have to be concerned that turned it into, offered up in libation to their God, which ones we don't. Particularly, we talked about Yayin mevushal today. And we talked about other liquids? Are we worried about snakes getting into them? What if the person's sleeping nearby, right? In what cases will a snake be concerned for their lives and not do? What will a snake do and not do when there's humans around, when they're awake, when they're asleep? We had all different options. And then also, not only is it an issue to drink this uncovered liquid, but it's also an issue to do all sorts of other things with it that might get into your body and cause an infection that could cause you to die. So you see how dangerous they saw this was. On the other hand, it's clear from the sugya that not everybody perceived this as so dangerous. So we also discussed that issue, and we don't know exactly what percentage of a chance it is, but there is a chance, and that's why the rabbis wanted this to be avoided. And with that, we'll finish for today. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom, B'sorot Tovot, and hopefully you won't come across snakes in your weekend, over your weekend.